The stage lights dimmed and then flared into brilliance. Applause roared through the studio as Prince Harry stepped onto the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, smiling, waving, and adjusting the cuffs of his navy blue blazer. It was supposed to be a light evening questions about his book, his new foundation, maybe a joke about living in California. But something in his eyes betrayed a different energy. His smile was there, but it didn't quite reach his soul. "Stephen." Colbert greeted him with warmth and wit, shaking his hand and joking. "So, Harry, do we call you Your Highness? Or has Netflix made that negotiable now?" The crowd laughed. Harry chuckled politely, his eyes scanning the room like a soldier reading terrain. They began casually. Parenting stories. Laughter about adjusting to American slang. Comments about rescue chickens and avocado toast. Colbert leaned forward, folding his hands like a man about to deliver a sermon, one sharpened by network ratings and hidden agendas. "So," Colbert said, his tone shifting ever so slightly, "your book, your truth. You've shared a lot about the royal family, intimate things, painful things. But don't you ever worry that maybe the world's tired of hearing the drama? That maybe you've become more of a tabloid headline than the humanitarian you want to be?" The air shifted. Harry didn't blink at first. He smiled, but it was then almost mechanical. For a moment, he looked past Colbert, toward the cameras, then back again. "I didn't write my book for the tabloids," he said slowly. "I wrote it because the truth had been spoken for me for too long." Colbert nodded, feigning understanding, but pressed harder. "But isn't there a difference between telling your story and selling it? There's the memoir, the docuseries, the podcast. Some say you've built a brand around being a victim." The crowd shifted in their seats. A few murmurs, some nervous laughter. Harry's expression changed. He leaned in slightly, the tension in his shoulders rising. "Do you think I built a brand out of survival?" he asked, his voice lower now. "You think speaking about trauma and abuse is ... branding?" Colbert didn't answer directly. He turned to the audience, made a face, and said, "Hey, I'm just asking the questions people at home are thinking." That's when it cracked. Harry sat back in his chair, folded his hands tightly, said, "You know, Stephen, it's easy to joke about this from behind a desk. It's easy to make ratings out of people's wounds. But what happens when the cameras are off and those people don't survive it?" The room went silent. No laughs, no coughs, no shifting. Just a long, uncomfortable silence. Stephen tried to recover. "Course, no one's doubting you've been through a lot, but transparency comes with accountability." "Don't you think that Harry cut him off? I was transparent. You just didn't like what it revealed." Colbert sat back, caught off guard. For a beat, neither of them spoke. Then Harry reached for his mic pack and slowly began to unclip it. "Weetar, you Colbert," started. Harry stood up. "This is what the truth becomes if it's a punchline in a suit, then maybe it's not worth sitting down for." He left the stage without another word, and Stephen Colbert, master of comedy, sat there, speechless. The moment Harry walked off the stage, a ripple of confusion swept through the studio. Cameras stayed fixed on Colbert's stunned face. Producers behind the scenes barked into headsets, trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. The applause sign flickered once, then turned off entirely, for the first time. In a long while, the Late Show audience didn't know if they were still supposed to laugh. Colbert glanced to the wings where Harry had disappeared and then looked directly into the camera. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "that's certainly one way to end an interview." A nervous chuckle echoed from a few corners of the room, but the weight of the moment hung heavy. This wasn't just an awkward celebrity storming off. This was Prince Harry walking out of one of America's biggest platforms on live TV. Within minutes, the clip was online. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok hashtags exploded. Hashtag Harry walks out. Hashtag Colbert clash. Hashtag royal meltdown. Some praised him. Some mocked him, others asked what had really triggered such a dramatic exit. But while the internet speculated, something else was happening, something far more dangerous. In a secured government office in London, the red phone rang. Mi5's director of public affairs took the call. The voice on the other end was tight, with urgency. He mentioned classified material on air. The director frowned. Did he name it? No, but he referenced the book. Orchid Protocol is embedded in the final draft. Silence. Pull every copy now. At the same time, across the Atlantic in New York, a woman named Rachel Duvall sat in her tiny newsroom cubicle. She was one of the few independent investigative journalists still working without corporate backing. Her phone buzzed. Anonymous. Number. A message appeared. You were right about Orchid. Colbert just triggered it. Watch the footage 1422. She pulled up the live feed, rewound, watched carefully, and there it was. Harry, seated, hands clasped, saying, "You think I built a brand out of survival?" But the next frame, just before Colbert interrupted Harry's, fingers tapped the side of the chair in a rhythmic sequence. 4 short taps, 3 long, 2 short again. It wasn't nervous movement. It was Morse code. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She decoded it quickly. Graythorn knows. Graythorn. The private intelligence firm she had been researching for months, officially disbanded after a scandal in 2014, but rumors of covert operations, surveillance deals, and media manipulation had never stopped. She stared at the screen. If Harry had just publicly signaled that Graythorn was watching him, or worse, controlling parts of the media, then this was no longer a PR disaster. It was a live security breach. Back at the studio, Harry's security detail had moved fast. He was already off the CBS lot and en route to a secondary location. His phone buzzed repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Megan had texted. His team had called. But Harry needed air, silence, time to think. He knew what he'd done. He hadn't just lost his temper. He'd challenged a machine. He had played by their rules for 2 long interviews, press tours, sound bites. But after years of being cornered, dissected, and undermined by headlines crafted in back rooms, he'd had enough. And tonight, under those bright lights, he had stopped pretending. But the cost of speaking out was always steep. 'Cause what? The public didn't know, and what his book hadn't dared to print in full, was that his family's media storm wasn't random. It had been engineered. And now the machine would move to silence him again. The city of New York buzzed with its usual late-night energy. But inside a modest Brooklyn apartment, the air was thick with tension. Rachel Duvall sat hunched over her laptop, the screen filled with documents, leaked memos, and an encrypted server window pulsing like a heartbeat. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her coffee had gone cold. The clip of Prince Harry tapping Morse code on The Late Show had spread quickly among digital watchdogs and underground intelligence networks. Rachel had been chasing Graythorn Global for years, and now a member of the royal family had just named them on international television without ever speaking the word aloud. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown contact. They're scrubbing the Orchid files. Whatever you have, offload it now. She plugged in her offline drive and began dragging entire folders. Inside were fragments of reports, payment trails, AI, speech models, and metadata pieces of a black-budget program she now understood was designed to do one thing: control perception. Meanwhile, 4,000 miles away in London, in a room hidden beneath a quiet government building, 3 men and 1 woman sat at a long glass table. No press, no cell phones. Just silence and a single open file stamped with a red classification label. Op Orchid P3, subject H. Sussex, he cracked, said the woman, her voice even but grim. In front of 30 million viewers, Morse. Verbal cues, the press will catch it by morning. One of the men leaned forward. It wasn't just emotional, it was tactical. He knew exactly how far he could go without making it treason. And if the public follows the trail, the third asked. We discredit the source, the woman replied, as we always do. Back in New York, Harry sat in the back of a black SUV shielded by tinted windows, flanked by a silent, trusted aide and a former intelligence contractor Megan had hired privately. The city blurred outside the window, but Harry's focus stayed on the device in his lap. The Orchid Protocol was never supposed to be real. It was just a phrase he'd overheard, a ghost rumor whispered by aides, journalists, and at one point his own brother. But after the Sussex exit, after the near-mental collapse Meghan suffered under press attacks, he started connecting the dots. Every headline, every leak, every conveniently timed anonymous source. It wasn't chaos, it was control. And now that control was slipping. He opened a private message from Rachel Duvall. Rachel, I have the source doc. Line item, project. NIS, neutralize, isolate, smear. Guess who it's tagged with? Attached was a PDF. Harry opened it slowly. There it was. Name, H. Sussex status. Ongoing narrative calibration partner. Entity, Graythorn Global. Tier 2 media assets, US, UK. Aligned, his mouth went dry. He had been right. He hadn't been paranoid. The stories weren't coincidences. They were crafted. The SUV turned sharply. His aide answered a call, nodded silently, and leaned forward. New instructions. We're diverting. It's too many digital pings. We think you've been tracked. Harry closed his laptop. So now what? We go dark, the aide replied. In the background, producers at CBS scrambled to contain the narrative. Emails flew between executives and crisis teams. One message from a top PR advisor read, Message pivot. Frame Harry's exit as emotionally unstable. Plant a mental health. Spin suggests he's overwhelmed by fame. Use friendly voices to amplify. By dawn, headlines were already changing. Prince Harry storms off Colbert set an emotional meltdown royal rage. Harry's night of drama, Colbert refuses to apologize. I just asked a question, but none of them reported the coded taps. None of them mentioned the leaked memo Rachel had confirmed. And certainly none of them talked about the real question. What else had been hidden? Rachel knew time was short. Graythorn was activated again. It meant people were watching. Her office, her emails, her family. But this wasn't just about Harry anymore. It was about every person Graythorn had silenced. Every narrative they'd bent. Every public figure who'd been discredited. Not by truth, but by design. Now, the one person who had the global reach to expose them all had just disappeared. The world awoke to chaos. Across news outlets, breakfast shows, and social media feeds. It's the same 20-second clip played on repeat. Prince Harry removing his mic, standing up in silence, and walking off the Late Show set. While Stephen Colbert sat frozen, blinking into the camera, pundits filled airtime with speculation. Was it staged? Was Harry mentally unwell? Had Colbert crossed a line? Every opinion was louder than the last, but none of them touched the truth. The one Rachel Duvall now held in her trembling hands. She sat in a secure co-working space just outside of Manhattan, the kind used by reporters who knew they were being followed. Her hard drive, now encrypted and cloned, contained not only the full Orchid Protocol documentation, but something more dangerous. A sub-project buried within a series of image files. Project Whistleglass. The files detailed a covert collaboration between high-profile media producers, government liaisons, and an entity Rachel had suspected but never confirmed, Graythorn Global, the same private intelligence firm once blacklisted, for its role in election tampering and psychological warfare in South America. It wasn't just Prince Harry. They had quietly rewritten the public image of celebrities, politicians, and activists for years, sometimes to protect state interests, sometimes for corporate leverage, and often just to test public reaction thresholds. Whistleglass made one thing clear. Harry wasn't the only target. He was just the loudest. Meanwhile, inside a government briefing room at MI6 headquarters, panic grew more measured, cold, controlled. He's not in California. He hasn't returned to London. He's disappeared, said one agent, placing a tracker map on the screen with a blinking red X that had gone dark outside Newark Airport. The director of strategic communications leaned back, frowning. That's not possible. He's got press, security, contracts. Someone would have seen him. Unless he planned this, said the youngest analyst in the room. The Morse code, the files. He knew Orchid wasn't just surveillance. He knew it was psychological manipulation. Across the room, the director narrowed her eyes. Prepare a counter-narrative. Frame him as paranoid. Isolate his voice. We can't let the public trust a man who's vanished into a fog of conspiracy theories. And so, by mid-afternoon, a fresh wave of media articles emerged. Mental health. Experts weigh in. Is Prince Harry spiraling? Sources close to the palace express grave concern over Harry's emotional state. Why Meghan is staying silent, but Rachel wasn't staying silent. She had already contacted a global press consortium. With everything she had, journalists from Germany, Kenya, Canada, and South Korea now had access to the Whistleglass archive. Her only message to them was clear: if I go quiet, you go louder. At the same time, in an undisclosed location, possibly somewhere in the Alps, according to chatter intercepted by Dutch cyber sleuths, Prince Harry was writing. Not a tweet, not a press release, speech. One to be read live without edits across at least 4 international networks. He was done playing defense, because if they wanted to frame him as broken, he would show them someone whole. If they wanted to reduce his pain to PR, he would turn it into purpose. But he knew the second he opened his mouth again, the storm would come. And this time, it wouldn't just be headlines. It would be governments. Suddenly, his secure laptop blinked. A message from an unknown source flashed. They've activated Contour. You have 48 hours. Don't trust the Americans. Not all of them? Harry exhaled. He didn't know who had sent it. But he believed every word, because the game had changed. And the next move wouldn't happen in a talk show chair. It would happen in front of the world, live and unfiltered. And if he failed Orchid, wouldn't just silence him, it would rewrite him. Rachel Duvall didn't sleep. The files she uncovered haunted her screen in loops, fragments of intercepted emails, transcripts redacted by half, and video stills that no one else had ever seen. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. Orchid. Protocol wasn't just about Harry. It was global. Influence operations, whisper campaigns, reputation, blackmail. Project Whistleglass was the cosmetic layer managing how the world saw people. But below that was a darker sublayer, contour and aggressive. Psychological leverage program designed to control behavior through fear, narrative, and silence. The last message Prince Harry had received, warning him about Contour and advising him not to trust certain American contacts, sent Rachel spiraling. She had always assumed the danger was on the British side, powerful royals and state-adjacent interests afraid of scandal. But now it looked bigger, older. Corporate Graythorne wasn't a rogue actor. It was a contractor. And someone had paid. Then that someone had tendrils across networks, political institutions, and media corporations. She stared at a name in her decrypted email dump. Gideon Rees, strategic liaison. Globovision Media. He wasn't a journalist. He wasn't even public-facing, but his name appeared on internal memos between Graythorne, CBS producers, and international syndication managers. He'd attended meetings about framing concerns surrounding Harry and Meghan. And one email timestamped 3 hours before the Colbert interview was chilling. If the subject deviates from prepared material, proceed with contour trigger phrases. Make it emotional. Get the outburst. It's the outburst. They'd engineered it, not just predicted it. Across the Atlantic, in a cold stone villa tucked deep, In Switzerland, Harry sat alone, his phone in airplane mode, disconnected from every channel except a single line, patched through to an encrypted server operated by an old contact someone from his military days. They hadn't spoken in years, but the man answered the moment Harry's code pinged the line. "Jesus, I thought you were dead." "Try not to be," Harry replied calmly. The man, known only as Keller, had once worked deep within the Ministry of Defense before falling off grid. Now he ran independent counter-intel networks, helping people disappear or reappear when systems tried to erase them. "I have one shot," Harry said, pacing the stone floor. "I need to go live. No handlers, no edits, no delays." "Then you'll need a decentralized uplink," Keller said. "We'll use mirrored platforms across 4 regions. But once you go on, you're a target." "I already am," Harry replied. Keller paused, then said, "You better finish it in one breath, 'cause they'll come before you take another." Back in New York, Rachel had reached her limit. The servers were closing in. She could feel it in the way her email froze, the way the lights flickered once, then again. She copied everything onto a solid-state chip, no bigger than her thumb, and placed it into a protective case. She slipped out of the co-working space through the back, ignoring the 2 men in suits loitering near the main doors. She knew surveillance eyes when she saw them. She hailed a cab and headed not to a safe house, but to a rooftop with direct line of sight to a satellite uplink. Her plan was simple: leak the contour and whistleglass documents to 3 international agencies simultaneously, bypass media, go straight to the people. But halfway through the ride, her phone buzzed. A message. Untraceable. Do not release. Wait for the broadcast. Trust him. She stared at it. Harry wasn't just planning to expose Graythorne. He was planning to expose the system, live. And if she leaked early, the message could be drowned in disinformation before it ever reached the public. She stuffed the chip deep into her coat pocket and tapped the driver. Change of plans. Drive slow. Very slow. The world didn't know it yet, but something was coming. Not a press release. Not a tweet. Something that would tear through every carefully curated broadcast. A live, unfiltered account that would put everything royalty, media, surveillance, and power on trial. And the man delivering it had already been erased once. He wasn't going to let it happen again. Snow began to fall lightly over the Alpine villa. Prince Harry stood on the balcony, watching the landscape blur into white silence. Below him, technicians worked quickly inside the makeshift control room, setting up signal relays and multi-feed transmitters. The clock was ticking. The satellite. Window 4's broadcast was small, and once it began, there would be no turning back. Keller approached him from behind, holding a small comms device. "We've got 4 feeds active. South Africa, Berlin, Toronto, and Sao Paulo. Rachel's team has the stream links. No one can shut all of them down fast enough." Harry nodded, and the mirror server's running. "Once you're live, it's global. It's 20 minutes or less. After that, expect interference." Harry looked at the icy horizon. "It's all I need." Inside the villa, Rachel Duvall's face flickered on the secure video monitor. She looked exhausted but alert. "This will hit harder if I go live after your feed," she said. "People need emotion first, documents later." Harry nodded slowly. "Then let's give them both." He turned away from the monitor, walked toward the camera now prepped for him, and sat down. No flags behind him, no suit, no makeup. Just Harry. No title. No palace. No PR. The screen lit green. Live across 4 continents. Millions of viewers got a notification they weren't expecting. Emergency global broadcast source H. Sussex. People tuned in on phones, on laptops, in bars, in offices. Even in some network control rooms, interns froze at their desks as a rogue feed overtook regular programming. And Harry began. "I was born into a story. One I didn't write, one I couldn't control. Most people know me as a prince. It's a tabloid headline, a walking scandal. But what I'm about to tell you isn't about royalty. It's about reality. He paused. No scripts, just memory. For years, I believed the attacks on my wife and I were the cost of leaving a system. That when we stepped away from royal life, we became targets for gossip, bitterness, and media obsession. But that's not the truth. The truth is, those stories weren't organic. They were manufactured. Key lean forward. Orchid Protocol, Contour Whistleglass. You haven't heard of them, but they've heard of you. These are not spy novels. They are real systems operated by a private intelligence firm named Graythorn Global. And their job was simple: control the narrative, design public perception, silence dissent. Images appeared on screen anonymized. Documents, time-stamped memos, even the Morse code clip from his Colbert interview. You watched me walk off that stage because I realized in real time I wasn't being interviewed. I was being triggered. The questions, the tone, the cuts engineered to make me crack, to turn emotion into spectacle. The chat streams exploded. Comment sections flooded. People were crying. Others were furious. But most of all, people listened. Graythorn has embedded itself into the fabric of media. Not just tabloids, but late night, morning shows, political panels. They influence how we view leaders, celebrities, movements, activists. You've seen their work without knowing it. You've believed their stories without ever knowing who wrote the script. His voice softened. My family tried to silence me. The institutions that claimed to protect us sold us. And for years, I played my role. I wore the mask. I smiled. I made it easier for them. He looked directly into the camera. But tonight, I'm taking it off for good. Then, just as the stream reached its most powerful point, a flicker crossed all 4 feeds. The broadcast distorted, static, freezing, buffering. Keller jumped. From his seat, they found us. But before the signal could fully collapse, a mirrored backup kicked. Inrichel's team in New York had anticipated this. The stream resumed, and so did Harry. This isn't about me anymore. It's about all of us. About every manipulated headline, every destroyed life. Every truth buried because it wasn't convenient for the powerful. I've given everything I have to a secure network of journalists. If anything happens to me, this story will still go on. You can't kill truth by deleting the source. And with that, the feed ended. Black screen, no outro, no applause. Silence, and then the internet shattered. In the next 5 minutes, the world would change, 'cause Harry hadn't just spoken, he detonated a bomb made of truth. And the blast was only beginning. Phones buzzed, screens froze, algorithms crashed. Prince Harry's live broadcast, though under 15 minutes, ignited a storm no media machine could contain. Within the hour, his words were being translated into 42 languages. Hashtags, like hashtag Orchid Files, hashtag Graythorn Leak, and hashtag We Hear You Harry surged into trending positions across the globe. In living rooms and cafes, in parliaments and press rooms, silence fell as the world tried to grasp what had just happened. And then a second signal hit. Rachel Duvall, seated in a dim underground command room in New York, appeared on a split screen across the same decentralized networks. Her voice was calm, her facts lethal. For over 6 years, I've investigated digital manipulation, private surveillance, and soft state propaganda under media disguise. What I'm about to show you confirms everything Prince Harry just risked his life to expose. She began screen sharing memos between Graythorn Global and media executives. Email exchanges, greenlighting psychological profiles on journalists. Budget approvals for public narrative shaping. A folder labeled Royal Family. Dissonance mapping, each file more disturbing than the last. Whistleglass isn't fiction. It's a model, a playbook. One used on Harry Meghan, activists in Brazil, protesters in Hong Kong, even local reporters in Detroit who asked the wrong questions. Across the globe, governments scrambled. In London, the Prime Minister's emergency cabinet was called in. In Washington, the White House press secretary canceled all scheduled briefings. In Berlin, media regulators opened investigations into transnational information warfare. But it was too late. The files were public. Encrypted bundles seeded across. The web unlocked only by community key protocols. No single authority could bury them. No court order could erase them. And within the chaos, truth bled through. CNN ran a full, uninterrupted hour of the Harry broadcast on loop. BBC hesitated, then followed. The Guardian launched an emergency podcast episode titled, "What the Hell Just Happened?" NBC tried to downplay the story. Within minutes, leaked. Emails showed its own connection to Graythorne media buys. They went dark. Meanwhile, inside a palatial London residence, a phone slammed down. A familiar voice hissed across a private encrypted line. "He's just burned every bridge. Q said he'd crack, he didn't. He controlled the damn storm." On the other end, a woman replied, "And what exactly do you want me to do?" "Assassinate a prince live on Zoom." The line went dead. In a remote Alpine safe house, Harry closed the laptop slowly. His team stood still. Keller leaned in from the side. "You just rewrote the rules of the modern monarchy." Harry didn't. Smile. He looked tired, hollow, but more awake than ever. "No," he said. "I just showed people the page we've all been reading from." A soft chime echoed from the satellite phone nearby. It was Rachel. "The UN wants to speak with you." Press. Conference, joint statement. Maybe hearings. Harry exhaled. "I'm not sure they deserve me." Rachel's voice softened. "They don't, but the people do." Across the world, protests began forming, not angry marches, but silent vigils, held with candles and phone screens lit in front of government buildings, in front of media studios outside Buckingham Palace. People gathered not just for Harry, but for truth. Because he hadn't cried, he hadn't yelled, he'd simply spoken clearly, painfully, and freely. And in a world built on noise, that silence broke everything. By midnight, Graythorne's headquarters had been raided in Zurich. CEOs vanished from social feeds. Internal servers began melting, purged by their own kill code. But it was over. Too late. The system cracked. And in its place stood something fragile, but finally visible, a man stripped of power, position, and privilege. A man who dared to speak not as a prince, but as a witness,